Hello guys, it is me again, it's HorrorFan34, and welcome back to another video, and welcome to, I guess, episode 3 of this series of videos where it's going to be this collection and discussion type of video. This ought to be an interesting one, because the first 2 episodes I did were on Bruce Willis and John Carpenter. So basically what this series of videos is basically I pick like a certain director or actor, things like that, and show every single thing I have in my collection that's, you know, part of their filmography. You know, I showed all my Bruce Willis movies I have in my collection, and I showed every single John Carpenter film that I own in my collection. And I figured that, you know, this would be a rather shorter one than usual, because I only own 3 things of this guy, and I figured this would be an interesting one to do. It's going to be on my Andrew Dice Clay collection. So this is episode 3, and many people who probably don't even know who he is. Andrew Dice Clay was a stand-up comedian who, back in like 89 to 1990, he was very, very, very successful. I think he was probably the only stand-up comedian that I know of that sold out Madison Square Garden, I think 2 nights in a row, which was very rare for a stand-up comic to do. And, you know, he was always known for his dirty nursery rhymes and, you know, things like that. So that's what Andrew Dice Clay is. He was a stand-up comedian who was selling out Madison Square Garden non-stop. And I only have 3 things of his that are in my collection. And, you know, Andrew Dice Clay is one of my personal favorite stand-up comedians. I think he's absolutely hilarious. You know, the whole dirty nursery rhymes and, you know, things like that. So I'm going to showcase, these are the only 3 things I have of his that he's a part of in my collection. So I figured I'd show this one first because this was, I guess, his first big break into movies. And unfortunately this film didn't do well and it flopped, and I highly enjoyed this film. The Adventures of Ford Fairlane. Basically this was around the time when Andrew Dice Clay was selling out Madison Square Garden, and they decided, hey, let's get this guy a movie. So they got him this one, The Adventures of Ford Fairlane. And they had director Renny Harlin, who at this point had did Elm Street 4, The Dream Master, which was, I think at that time, the highest grossing Elm Street film. And I figured they'd get Renny Harlin to do this film. You know, and Renny Harlin as a director, I thoroughly enjoy him as a director. You know, I really enjoyed Nightmare on Elm Street 4, Prison, this film, Cliffhanger, Die Hard 2, Deep Blue Sea, Mindhunters. So, you know, Renny Harlin is a director who I do enjoy a lot. And I think this is one of my personal favorite ones that he did. And I would say this is probably one of my favorite films of all time. Well, it's one of my personal favorite comedies of all time. I think this film is hilarious. Andrew Dice Clay is rock and roll detective Ford Fairlane, who's on this case. Wayne Newton is your bad guy. Yes, that Wayne Newton is your villain. You also have Robert Englund as a bad guy. You know, Robert Englund, of course, Freddy Krueger himself, which I'm probably why Renny Harlin got Robert Englund for this film, because they worked together on Elm Street 4. So they figured, hey, let's get Robert Englund to be a part of this film. And you have a lot of other people in the film too. Besides, you know, Andrew Dice Clay, you have Wayne Newton and Robert Englund, but you also have Priscilla Presley, Morris Day from Morris Day and the Time, Tone Loc. You have an appearance by Gilbert Gottfried. You also have Ed O'Neill, who was on Married with Children. But this is just a really fun comedy film, and I think it's a really fun film. You know, you're a poet and you didn't even know it. Oh! You know, Andrew Dice Clay, that was like the way he always delivered like the dirty nursery rhymes, you know, oh! You know, at the very end of every joke. like there's a like in the movie, like you see in the trailer. Yeah, this one girl comes up to Ford Fairlane and says, "Hey, you're the guy who's the private eye, and you're a poet, and you didn't even know it." Oh, you know. So this film is hilarious, absolutely hilarious. I can't say enough more about the Adventures of Ford Fairlane. And the next one I have here is actually the only stand-up of his that I have. It's my favorite stand-up of his, which I believe this was in 1991. Dice Rules. This was at Madison Square Garden right here. This is without a doubt my favorite stand-up of Andrew Dice Clay. You know, it's NC-17 rated. It's very, very dirty stuff what he's saying. But I think this is hilarious. A very hilarious stand-up. This is with all the dirty nursery rhymes and things like that. I'm not gonna ruin what the jokes are. I want you to see it for yourself. I think they're really, really funny. Yeah, but really, really fun stand-up. Dice Rules. And the last I have of his in my collection is actually a very different kind of movie for Andrew Dice Clay. This is actually a full-fledged, serious action movie, kind of like a Die Hard movie, where it's basically Die Hard at a beauty pageant. No Contest, where Andrew Dice Clay is your main bad guy, who is this leader of these group of these bad guys who take over this beauty pageant, and they take everybody hostage. And and his main henchman is the late great Roddy Piper, who is They Live and among others. And you have Shannon Tweed in the film as well as the female hero. You also have you have Robert Davi, who was in Die Hard. Directed by Paul Lynch, same guy who directed the original Prom Night, did this film. But I think this film is one of the more underrated Die Hard kind of like movies. And Andrew Dice Clay as a villain, I think he worked really, really well. I think he played cold and calculating pretty well. Considering how much of he was mainly known as a stand-up comic. I think he pulled off a very cold and calculating villain very well. It's far from over, Sharon. If any one of you, like the way he delivered his lines, I think, he pulled it off well. I think Roddy Piper is very entertaining as his main henchman. His character name's Ice. So, Robert Davi is the guy who's trying to help out Shannon Tweed. Trying to help her out along the way. He's part of the force, things like that. Yeah, but No Contest. I mean, this film was successful enough, it got a sequel, No Contest 2, where Shannon Tweed came back as the same character, and I think he had Lance Henriksen in the sequel. But never saw the sequel, but this film was popular enough that it got a part 2, so there's that. But really do enjoy the film, though. But that is pretty much it for my Andrew Dice Clay collection. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks a lot for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Alright guys, take care.